Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion with your sister, Dr. Ma'at. I'm the host. This is the Read Book Club. I didn't butcher the whole introduction, Brother T, but I'm going to keep on going. So, look, what I wanted to say, family, let's do a rewind. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion. Today, we are discussing the myth and propaganda of Black buying power, Chapter 6. I'm sorry, I started introducing the show as if it was like one of my solo truth to power talks or my solo discussions, but this is the Read Book Club convening again to discuss Chapter 6 of the myth and propaganda of Black buying power. The title of this chapter is Freedom Was the Call, but instead they got a bank. Remember we read this title last week. And it was like, I said, what are they going to be talking about, Brother T? And you said, oh, they may bring up the Freedmen's Bank. He may talk about, you started naming, the different banks.
Ideas,
right. Yeah. And so we actually read it, family. And tonight we're going to discuss it. But before we do, Brother Everett, Brother T, please introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Brother Everett.
Hey, peace and blessings, Brother Everett, Baltimore UNIA, and ultimate fan of Dr. Martin, the book club.
Awesome, God family. This is Brother Tibolo, known as Brother T. Thank you once again joining us for another powerful discussion of this book, Chapter 6. Let's see what we get into.
Absolutely, family. And look, I don't want you all, if you don't have the book or if you didn't read the chapter, don't run out, right? Just stay on, log on, share the show. Because you're going to learn some things tonight. You're going to learn some things. People join all the time, even though they may not have read the book or haven't read the chapter, but just check, just stay put and stay in the discussion. So Dr. Ball, and for those who are just joining us, and I see that people are trickling in, again, we're discussing the myth and propaganda of Black buying power by Dr. Jared Ball. Tonight, we're discussing Chapter 6. Freedom was the call, but instead they got a bank. And so, brother T and Brother Everett, we've been hearing this for years. Bank Black. I mean, I got caught up in it. I have my Harbor Bank card. I have a personal account with Harbor Bank. I have a business account with Harbor Bank. And so even I had my boys would take their money out of Wells Fargo. I had them put their money in Harbor Bank. They mentioned the industrial bank down in DC. Isaiah has a bank account with them, and he actually worked for them for about a year. Wow. They're situated like a mile and a half from Howard University, and that's where he was going to school. And so he ended up getting a job at a Black bank because his major is finance. And so he went down there to work for, the Black bank, because I kept saying, you got to work for your people. We got to bank Black. We got to buy Black. We got to work for our people, because this is the only way we can change our economic condition here in America. So I was, an avid, supporter of, just, banking Black. But I can honestly say that this chapter was very eye-opening for me. A lot of the things that he mentioned, like he initially said, banking Black is not going to change, the economic conditions of the entire Black community. And initially I said, oh, he's being a Debbie Downer. Here we go. Yeah. But then when he started discussing why, I said to myself, okay, he's making some really good points. Banking Black would be great if Black banks were supported by the government. And Brother T, you keep driving that point home as regarding Black businesses and banking Black. You're saying, hey, these endeavors are great, but we have to understand that in business, in banking, there was a relationship with the government. And so if the government isn't creating policies to support these institutions, they won't thrive. At least not in the capacity that we would like for them to thrive. Right. Brother Ever and Brother T, do you want to jump in?
I always want us to remember this, what Dr. King was trying to do. He realized the boycotts could keep money out certain businesses in Selma's, business structure, the busing industry. But not until he realized on his last leg of his push to get economic inclusion that he needed to go to government to get the money, because the funding was what was important, correct? And when we start this chapter here in Chapter 6, we start to talk about the Freedom Bureau, and I didn't want us to skim past that but I'll let Brother Everett go with some thoughts before we start to dissect this page of the chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, that was good what you said. I can't wait till we go into that, brother T. And this chapter, like you said, I don't want to go too far into it, but I'm with Dr. Mike. You said hard, but I'm with One United
Mm-hmm.
Bank, and they talk about that specifically. And I was all pumped up, and they get the card, and I'm like, this is a great concept that we invest, but like they say, he starts to break down that whole marketing thing before he even gets into like the why black banks won't be successful. He gets into the marketing using the rappers and things like that, the marketers, and then how he breaks it down. So, like you said, I don't want to go too far, but this was a very interesting eye-opening chapter to me.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And as brother T said, he starts off with, a strong statement. He says, banking black is often promoted along with buying power as a means toward collective advance with a long tradition. So this isn't new. Banking black and buying power, none of these concepts are new. This is what he's saying. He says it has a long tradition dating back to the 19th century, from the post-Civil War era to the 21st century. From the Freedmen's Bureau to hashtag Bank Black, there continues some form of the idea that redirecting existing black money, buying power, into black banks can be a collective corrective measure to persistent inequality. That was a very strong
Mhm.
opening, brother T.
Mm-hmm.
So he all of these solutions that he's basically saying there's nothing new under the sun. Your
Right.
ancestors did this. Your ancestors had the same idea. Oh, we got this. We could take the money. We could put it in banks. And, he's saying we've been doing that forever. And then he's saying that we've been proposing these things as solutions to persistent inequality, meaning that nothing has changed. So it's persistent.
Right.
Nothing has changed even with these solutions. But one thing was key is that he mentioned the Freedmen's Bank. Brother T, did you want to talk about that before I showed the video that you sent me earlier?
I would like you to show the video because then we can definitely have that context that the Bureau, since it was mentioned on this page of chapter 6 about the Bureau, some may not know what the Bureau was. So let's show the video and then we can expound on it once it's finished.
All right.
On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, an executive order that proclaimed the freedom of enslaved African Americans in states that had seceded from the Union. Over 2 years later, the Civil War was ended, and by December of 1865, the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified, abolishing slavery in the United States. Each of these steps helped nearly 4 million former slaves gain their freedom. These African Americans faced a long, difficult road to independence, and for many, it was a challenge even to find shelter and work. One of the first steps President Lincoln took to help them was urging Congress to establish the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, more commonly known as the Freedmen's Bureau, in March of 1865. The Bureau helped former slaves secure jobs by drawing up labor contracts and providing temporary housing, food, and medical care. It was also tasked with reuniting families that were separated during the Civil War. The Freedmen's Bureau legalized marriages and kept detailed records that are housed in the National Archives to this day. But perhaps its greatest achievement was in education. The Freedmen's Bureau established thousands of freedmen's schools in the South, increasing Black literacy to above 30%. It also built several colleges that are known today as historically Black colleges and universities, like Fisk University in Tennessee and Howard University in Washington, D.C., granting more than 1,000 college degrees to African Americans by 1872. The Freedmen's Bureau's accomplishments did not come easy. Its efforts were not supported by the majority of white Southerners, and many white Northerners were ambivalent toward its goals. After President Lincoln was assassinated, Vice President Johnson took his place. As a Southerner, Johnson had little sympathy for the former slaves. He quickly cut funding to the already unpopular program. At the same time, white people that worked for the Freedmen's Bureau often had to deal with ridicule. Even so, many Bureau workers stayed in the South helping the Reconstruction effort by getting involved in politics, renting homes, and rebuilding their own lives and the economy as well. While the lack of funding contributed to the disbandment of the Freedmen's Bureau in 1872, its influence is noteworthy. For many African Americans, the services of the Freedmen's Bureau were a vital source of support as they created new lives and sought to claim their new freedoms.
Mm, that was powerful, brother T. Let me go here. There we go. So let's take it back. I want to
Right.
take it back. The Freedman Bank. So, okay, here we go. That's when they up. Okay. So, brother T, and
Mhm.
someone asked for the link in the chat. I'll make sure Pro Woman J that I drop the link for you in the chat. Okay. And so, brother T, you know what I noticed when I looked at this, when I just looked at this with you actually for the first time, you said
Mhm.
to me earlier, but it seems like if they were successful, the bank was successful until the government withdrew support. I mean, it seems like that was the case. They had the ability to set up all of these programs, but when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and what it says, was it Andrew Jackson
Andrew
got it?
Jackson.
Yeah, Andrew Jackson got in there, and he started changing policies, and
Mhm.
then it pretty much seems like everything crumbled. So brother T, go ahead and expound on that. Build on what we just talking about
Well,
in the video.
I wanted to stress on the bureau because it was like the first form of social service for blacks, for free slaves.
Andrew Johnson. I'm sorry, John
Yep.
Tate says
Sorry,
Andrew Johnson.
Andrew Johnson. My apologies.
Mm-mm.
Just like the first social service for free slaves. You've seen all the benefits. You've seen the building of the schools, of the universities, of Fisk University, Howard University. You've seen also saw that the bureau made sure they had food, clothing, shelter, and ability to have land. Now, due this short period of time, when the war, Civil War was over, you had blacks at the sea, near the waters of Georgia, who took land of all of the Confederacy who fled because they lost the war. During that time, they took the land of the former plantations and then tried to make that a settlement. But because of Johnson, when he got into office after the assassination, he says, you know what? I don't care what y'all trying to do. I'm gonna take the land from you.
Mm.
He took the land. Now the general, I can't think of the general name right now, but it's part two of this video. The general came up with, he was an army general. He came up and said, "Hey, we got 40,000 acres, and we have some mules that the servicemen used to use that they've been going with us during the travel, and we don't mind giving these away." So this is where 40 acres and a mule came from. So once this was established, that general set forth to say, "Hey, let's give the free slaves land." So that's when a group of slaves, last name Campbell, one of the slaves named Campbell, who set up in St. Ann Island, I believe in Georgia, and that was a former plantation. He set up a militia. He set up rules and regulations. He split up some of that land and gave slaves as well. But once Johnson got into office, he says, you know what? Go down there and take that land back. So the former sharecroppers went down there and took the land. So the point I wanted to make is that, first of all, we did try to build our own before Black Wall Street on free land. It was taken away from us. Both of these things happened because we didn't have protection. But
Mm.
I want to go into Freeman's Bank. Founded on March 3rd, 1864.
Mm.
The founder was John W. Alvord. The successful years of Freeman's Bank deposited $57 million in the bank. It collapsed in 1864 because of mismanagement and B, fraud. President Abraham Lincoln established the Freeman's Bank on March 3rd, 1865, as part of the Freedmen's Bureau. That's why I wanted to mention the Freedmen's Bureau. 7 years later, on June 1872, the U.S. Congress voted to permanently close Freeman's Bank. Okay, so on March 3rd, 1865, Congress passed an act to establish the Bureau for relief of freemen and refugees to provide food, shelter, clothing, medical services, land to displaced Southerners, including newly freed of African Americans. That's why I wanted to mention the Bureau. So when he says they gave him a bank, remember, they did try to give us land. It was snatched back away from us based off the government. And all we got was the bank, which was closed 7 years later. But did you hear $57 million was accumulated, deposited into this bank, and it was snatched away from us. So when we read the next book, The Color of Money, we'll understand. But I'm glad Dr. Ball mentioned that. That's why I laugh at the title. It's a powerful title. You know what I'm saying? Let's read that title again. Freedom was the call. Instead, they got a bank. The freedom would have came from the land and protection and the bank. But all that was snatched away from us based off the lack of protection under the law.
And T, I don't have, Brother T, I don't have what you were reading in front of me. And so the bank was established before the Bureau, right?
The bank was established at the year again, 1864. Okay. And the Bureau was I believe it was 1865.
Okay, so it was the bank before the Bureau. Okay, I wanted to make sure.
And I said the reason why I said the Bureau was like a form of social service to African Americans because the services that they provided for free slaves.
I'm sorry, Dr. Ma. I wanted to ask Brother T something about you when you were saying the 40 acres and the mule. And I think I heard Dr. Clark Anderson say something like that. Was that kind of a form of reparation to slave owners? Because the slave owners were saying that, you're freeing the slaves and you're giving them land. And somehow they was able to take the 40 acres back and give it to the slave owners. Am I making sense to you?
Yeah, you're making sense.
Okay.
Basically, it came from the general. The general name totally escapes me. I didn't get a chance to write the general name down to remember. But the general came up with understanding that they had 40,000 acres based off of Georgia. What's the turtle? Okay, I don't want to misspeak, but based off this land that was in the South, owned by the Confederacy, and also the mules that were used by the soldiers. He said, well, this is what we have from the free slaves. Why not give them this? So they were making steps. That's where the 40 acres and a mule came from, to making steps to give that to us. But like I said, Andrew Johnson snatched it away by basically saying, hey, he did not sympathize with the slaves. He was sympathizing with
the owners. Right,
with owners. So he gave a mandate to make sure that the owners get back the land that was taken from them through this act. So the Freedmen's Bureau has a lot in them. And the reason why I bring that up, because I want us to go back to read and study that and understand everything that happened in that short period of time. And that can explain up into Freedmen's Bank. Read up on Freedmen's Bank to understand what exactly happened. It was an all-white staff or board members that mismanaged that money. Okay, that has not been solved or that problem been fixed. And the accumulation of money was $57 million. So when you say that we can put in black banks now, understand what Dr. Ball is saying in his commentary and his writing in his chapter. It's not to be smirked. It's going by what we have already accomplished, what has been done. And because of not having a protection, it's been swiped away.
Absolutely. And one of the elders, Brother OG Gorilla Silverback, he said, brother, please stop calling out ancestors, slaves. He said, please. Yeah, we call them African captives, elder. So
African captives.
we call them African captives.
I stand corrected.
So
I stand
that-
corrected.
you know how the elders they come through and they correct. So
Respect.
appreciate, yeah, we appreciate that,
Respect.
elder OG, respect. So brother T, but I love that you brought that up, and you made a powerful statement. You said that they were able to snatch back the land because we didn't have any protection. So they were able to do whatever they wanted to do with us or to us because we didn't have the protection. I.e., when you say we didn't have the protection, we didn't have the backing of our government. Is that what you're saying, brother T?
Guess what I'm saying. And what the I did make a snapshot. Maybe we can look into this. Special Field Order number 15.
Mm-hmm.
This is what was written.
General Sherman. Is his name General Sherman?
That
There
General
we go.
Sherman.
Okay. Okay.
General
Okay.
Sherman. He did the Special Field Orders number 15, and that wasn't upheld when Andrew Johnson made that order to give that land back to the original to pull the original orders. So that's what he used in order to give the 40 acres and mule what he wanted to use. Special Field Orders number 15. General Sherman. You're correct.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So hopefully that answered your question, brother Everett. But I wanted to, and I'm glad, brother T, that you brought up Dr. King, and you said that before he got assassinated, he started realizing, wait a minute, we need. I mean, the boycotting was fine, but we, that wasn't as effective as I thought it was going to be. And so, he's a forward thinker. And so he said, well, no, we need to start going after the policy, and we need the redistribution of resources, wealth, and power. That's what needs to be done. And the only way that we can do that is by going to the government and amassing political power. So now this is what I wanted to show you. I know you all heard about his daughter, Bernice King, going at Biden. I thought
Oh,
about
I
her
hear
father.
this.
Oh yes, she was.
Oh man.
She's calling out Jim Crow Joe.
Jim Crow Joe.
She calling out Jim Crow Joe. And she's like, when she found out that they're talking about giving these Afghans millions of dollars, she said it's really a spit in the faces of Black Americans.
Was it
And so
$450,000?
$450 million. Was
That's
it 450?
crazy.
No, you're right. 450,000. You're right.
Per
person,
family.
per family.
Per family though, that's still that's wow.
Yeah. And so she had some choice words for him. So let's check it out. Let me
legislative, and yes, economic trauma. As my father said, we must recognize.
Oh, a few people said they couldn't hear the video. My apologies. Let me take it back. People are like, I can't hear the video. All right, hold on. My apologies.
My heart is extremely heavy right now. And I hope all who hear this message and have the power to do something will act. While I, like so many of you, care deeply for the families separated at our border and believe that assisting them is the just thing to do, I question how the president of this nation has it in his heart to consider this without also expressing and working to fulfill the need for reparations for Black people who have endured generations of physical and relational, psychological, legislative, and yes, economic trauma. As my father said, we must recognize that we can't solve our problem now until there is a radical redistribution of economic and political power.
Oh, wait a minute, brother T. Hold up. What did she say that Dr. King said? Because you got people that, oh, I just focus on the politics or just focus on the economics. What did she say? Hold on, let me take it back a couple of seconds. Hold on.
And political power. Radical. As my father said, we must recognize that we can't solve our problem now until there is a radical redistribution of economic and political power.
Both, brother T.
Mm.
Both. A redistribution of economic and political power. This is why Dr. Amos Wilson in Blueprint for Black Power talked about both politics and economics. This is why Dr. Claude Anderson in his book talked about both politics and economics. We have to do both. But as you said, T, one helps the other, right? Because policies create the wealth. Policies control and manage the wealth. Policies perpetuate the wealth. And so we have to have both. We have to have both. We can't just say we're going to buy black and bank black and expect to get power. It's not going to happen like that. Not while we're here. Not while we're here. We need to be doing both. Brother T, Brother Everett.
You know, that was something that was a little special that hit the heart too, because we've been reading all of this stuff talking about how the government policies are against black people. So you would think, you know, they talk about buying power. That's what we focus on. Buy black, you know, promote black businesses, put your money in black businesses. But now that I'm thinking, and she's talking about the laws and the policies, I'm like, well, and it talks about it a little bit as we go further. Well, am I benefiting from banking black? Am I going to get, you know, better loan rates? You know what I'm saying? Are they getting the benefits from the government to help me out?
Right.
And so now I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really getting an advantage really from that avenue. So, you know, that really struck home what she was talking about with the politics and you know, stuff like that. It's the distribution of wealth.
Yeah, I mean that was powerful, Dr. Mott. Thanks for sharing that. 'Cause I did not see that, but I'm glad that was mentioned, because that's what Dr. King was pushing for. That was the last leg of his puzzle, I believe. Go ahead.
No. I was getting ready to say absolutely. And I wanted to get into why isn't banking black the solution? And so Dr. Ball begins discussing that on page 93. He says that black people do not have enough to deposit or wealth to offer as collateral, and we know that after reading, you know, the hidden cost of being an African American, right? So he says that blacks do not have enough to deposit, wealth to offer as collateral, nor the ability to circumvent persistent white supremacist devaluation of black housing, land, or business to generate the kinds of banking or economic strength required to serve the needs of the black community. And so then he mentions the book, The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap. And the author says that black banks cannot solve problems of inequality because of the very nature of banking. And so a lot of the times, Brother T, to me, it seems like we come up with these solutions to black problems without truly analyzing this stuff, right? Because my whole thing is this. It says the very nature of banking. How many of us actually understand the way banks work, how they make their money? I mean, we know deposits, loans, and how your money is being reinvested, but how many of us really understand the banking system?
Right.
Not a lot of people. If you sat down and spoke to the average person about the way the bank, but we'll say, oh, we need to bank black, and let's talk about how the banking system works, and then let's see if this could be a solution to solving the economic problems of black people. But she says black banks cannot solve problems of inequality because of the very nature of banking and ultimately the white supremacy carried out through public policy, which both limits the income and wealth black people have historically and today been able to accumulate and which mitigates material gain by devaluing what Black people own. Remember, Brother T, you sent me an article a few years back that said that we pay a Black tax, a segregation tax. Anytime it said that the Black community lost billions of dollars simply if we want to buy a house in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So we get penalized
That's
for
right.
just wanting to live around each other. Right?
Mhm.
For just wanting to live around each other, we get penalized because the same house that's situated in the Black community, if we were to take that same house, put it in the white community, it may be worth, 2 times worth the value than it would have been if it had been in our community. And so she's saying that we don't even control that process, right? And so he says, for instance, on page 94, it says the call to deposit Black income in Black banks does not help small banks. Black banks, as is assumed. Deposit, the author of Color of Money, points out, are liabilities to banks. How many people would have suspected that your deposit is a liability to a bank?
That's right.
So it says banks, I'm going to read this again. The call to deposit Black income in Black banks does not help small banks, Black banks, as is assumed. Deposits are liabilities to banks. Deposits become debt, which banks must service with interest and have covered and available should any depositor want her money at any given time. Unlike larger banks, working with much larger sums and with full access to invest those sums in the global economy, assuring greater returns, Black banks cannot afford to loan out, and do not recuperate loans at the same rate and with the same levels of profit.
So
Dr. I had highlighted that, and I was like, I'm going to ask you and Brother T, because that hit home right there. And you just mentioned it. You led us into it when you were like, do we really know how banks make their money? You were setting that up. And I was trying to say that when I was talking about, will I get a better deposit? Like, you
Right.
said it correctly. And it's like, all right, so what is the banks are investing our money? And he's letting you know you don't make enough money to invest in global economy stuff. And I'm like, so they're investing I never I probably knew it, but I never thought about it when you're thinking about banking. So they're doing things with their money to make more money. And our Black banks are not connected like that. They don't have enough money to even make the money that the larger banks make. So we're at a disadvantage in a lot of ways. I was shocked.
It becomes a Ponzi scheme, as he mentioned on page 97.
Yep.
Let's go there. And he talks about industrial bank. Let's go page 97. Okay, he says, and this be talking about the second paragraph, and we starting at Mitchell explained that industrial bank made loans to the point where we need deposits to fund the loans made to other customers. Never mind, the Mitchell response seemed more to describe a classic Ponzi scheme or pyramid scheme than any actual community wealth producing mechanism or process. But as stated, the limitations are inherent to the situation itself. Black people, as a result of history of white supremacy and economic exclusion, earn less, have what little they own devalue as a result, and therefore are given less and more interest laden loans. So, Jesse, it wasn't a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme. It sounded like a pyramid scheme is like you won't get your money unless somebody else puts it in.
Yes.
And that's how it was starting to sound. Just by putting money in a bank, by depositing, don't bring no power. It has to be able to lend. And when it's lend, you have to gain interest. The bank gains interest on giving loans, cars, giving loans for homes, So these are the things they get money from. If people just deposit and taking out, the bank shall fall. What is the bank going to be able to do? Just be some way to hold your money for 1 or 2 days? So as he said, it becomes a pyramid scheme. That's what it sounds like to him. So we got to think about that. So perfect question, Brother Everett. You asked, what do you get for your deposit?
Right.
Nothing.
Get better loan rates or anything, because they're telling you right off the bat. They tell you right off the bat, black banks don't have enough power to give you better loans. You know,
Right.
so what's the advantage of banking there then? You know
So,
what I mean?
so what was the thing that we try to push Barack Obama to do with Bank of America and the banks when they swallowed up the money in the first recession? Make sure you give loans to African Americans for homes. We said, and Byron Allen asked them, I need you to audit the banks to see how much money they give to us. This was a question, right? So the question is for a black bank, our Harper banks, our industrial banks, we need to audit. What are you doing for the members? Are you giving money for their business? Are you giving money for their homes? What are you giving? The banks aren't doing a thing.
Mm.
But we're depositing it for what? Banks use our money to do what? To invest.
To invest.
Right? They invest with other banks. They buy up real estate. You got to understand what this works. Remember when we talked about the last chapter, how this all works. They fund businesses, the customer, the product, the person who produced the product, and the bank finances all. They make money off it all because both of them people go to them for loans. Understand? The bank is the part of the equation. So we have to remember, if our black banks don't do that, what do they do?
What good is it? Like
Right,
how
right.
effective are they in changing the economic condition of our people? So I want to kind of go back to page 95 where he makes this point. He says the reported, he's talking about 131 billion that is sitting in a minority owned banking assets. It says it will put the collective value held by 156 banks as only the 16th among the top US based banks alone. Now he says the top three of those banks are JP Morgan Chase,
Mhm.
Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Each alone have assets in the trillions. One of these banks by themselves have nearly 10 times what all of the so-called minority-owned banks have combined, and therefore can use those assets to create even more vast wealth in ways black banks never can. The wealth and opportunity these dominant banks generate is routinely used, absent detail, as reference points for the claims that black banking can in some way create similar realities for black people. And this is, I underlined this statement right here. He says, but gaps in society play out at all levels, and banking is no different. Banking is no different.
Mm.
Mm.
You know. So then he moves on to page 96 and he talks about, and I really like this black economist. It says Andrew Bremer, a black Harvard trained economist. He says, in the first black governor of the Federal Reserve under Lyndon B. Johnson, when he talks about capitalism, because that's another thing, just buy black, spend black, and we'll be fine, right? Be business owners, become a black business owner, and we spend our money with black businesses, we start businesses, we bank black, we'll be fine. He
Mhm.
says this. He described black capitalism and banking as a cruel hoax, a mirage, and as ornaments. Bremer's ultimate concerns were simply that black people have been segregated economically, not just socially, from all wealth producing mechanisms, and as a result cannot supply the originating revenue or have access to global mechanisms of wealth production. To have banks be anything other than sources of racial pride, but never instruments of economic development.
Wow.
Global. He said that twice when he
Mm.
was talking about that global, worldwide. So it's like, when you're thinking about it, you focus in on just America, maybe, and Black Americans, and you like that their banks are going global with it. So it's more than kind of the struggle here that they're globally marketing and networking and building money, and we're just struggling to get a small bank off the ground and think we can do it here. It's a global scale.
Mhm.
It's a lot of money out there that our banks can't even come close to touching.
And
Being
can't
black
even
owned.
access it. They
Yeah, that's
can't even.
crazy.
They don't have the access.
And
Mm.
Antonio Moore said something that I used to cringe when I hear it. He says blacks are a contagion to wealth. Wherever wealth is, it flees based
Mm.
off based off the policies and they put in place to protect, keep us away from it. But perfect example, we talked about communities, we talked about our neighborhoods. We do get the money from a bank to buy in our neighborhoods. We don't get as much for our house when we try to sell it, than we would if we had a more influenced neighborhood. So the redlining was something that segregation that was created by the government, as we learn in a book called The Color of Law, talks about that, very intricately. How the government with programs and policies kept redlining alive by slicing up cities and states, keeping us away from that wealth trap. So just remember, it's all planned. It's a big machine moving with this.
Hmm. Definitely, we are. We're up against a whole machine, and again, this is not to say that we shouldn't strive to build our own,
Not at all.
economic institutions,
Know what
our
we're up
own
against.
businesses. We say, brother T.
Know what we are up against.
Right, that's what it is.
Mhm.
We have to know what we're up against. So we're saying, yeah, let's build our own economic institutions. Let's do it. Let's build our own
Mhm.
schools. Let's build our banks. Let's do. But we have to understand our limitations,
Mhm.
and not that should discourage us from building, but like you just said, we have to understand what we're up against
No,
you know
Sun Tzu. You know about Sun Tzu.
Mhm.
He says, "Know your terrain." Not saying that we shouldn't have our warriors ready. Not saying we shouldn't have go out and fight. I'm saying before we go, know what we're getting into.
Mhm.
And I think that as we hear, we know people who say we'll fight, we'll go do what we got to do, we'll start this business, not knowing the playing ground, not knowing the rules, not understanding the banks. Everything this chapter is explaining, it's not really knowing everything we need to understand before we go out and do what we need to do. And I think that we need to sit back and understand. Hey, do understand, then do. So
Absolutely.
Brother T, I like what you said about that because I think if we look back and we can rescale the process of starting a black bank and know what we need to do economically, maybe in years we could obtain a little better success. But right now we're going in without that knowledge, just thinking I'm gonna invest my money, put my money in there, and we're not gaining anything, no benefits at all, no lower loan rates, nothing. The bank can't even invest in larger things to earn us money. Like
mhm.
it's kind of a scam. It's a marketing tool. They got top people, Jay-Z. I think it's talking about Jay-Z, Killer
that's
Mike,
that's something like that.
market in the bank. So you our youth especially are going to look up to them um, as moguls. You know what I'm saying? And I'm
Mhm.
going to follow that and buy black and support black. But it's also not telling us how we need to go about doing it. Like you said early, Dr. Matt, it's not really. You're not saying don't buy black and don't invest in black, but we
Mhm.
need to understand the goal that we're trying to do and accomplish when we invest. Just
Right.
Yeah,
don't put your money up for the slogan or the cause. Let's make sure that the politics and the resource and the laws and everything are to our advantage.
absolutely. And I like what brother T said, know your terrain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Know your
Know your
terrain.
terrain. Know
He,
your terrain. So brother, I'm sorry, go ahead, brother T.
he speaks about, and I'm brother Ever just brought it up. Killer Mike and what Jay Z. Killer Mike, definitely we know that he, represented. He also pushed Bernie Sanders, and we know Jay Z also pushed, Hillary Clinton. No one talked about what, and they both pushed Bank Black, Buy Black. But I'll be hard pressed to find anything that was really for us in any one of those campaigns, even though they asked us to push and support them, right? Support the, Bernie Sanders. Killer Mike was 2 terms, 2 runs. He was supporting them. What in his agenda was going to benefit us? Because we already know Bernie Sanders was not about reparations. We know Hillary Clinton was not about reparations. So what in that agenda was really helping us? What they were tools. They were tools for those 2 candidates, right? And they're tools for this whole agenda of buy black and banking black. It's either or. No one's offering a layout exactly how it's going to benefit us either way, but they was both used to help put people in office. that had no agenda for us, i.e., Jim Crow Joe.
Jim Crow Joe. And Brother Brian Mitchell, he asked the question. He said, "What are the solutions to these obvious and apparent systemic attacks on our freedom?" So
Good
I just
question.
wanted to know. Yeah, that's what I said. What's a question? I mean, the only thing I would do is I always direct people to Claude Anderson's work, Dr. Amos Wilson's work, the Honorable Marcus Garvey's work. Even today, you have Takai Kilimanjaro. So Kemetic University Press. They are a very solution oriented group, and they have a lot of books out that explains the solutions and what we
It's
need to do.
awesome.
I know that chapter 7 in Dr. Ball's book, the conclusion, it says policy and organization versus economics. So brother Brian, I'm curious to see the solutions that Dr. Ball, if anything, presents in chapter 7, because you're right. We can talk about the problems, we can analyze the problems, but like you said, brother Brian Mitchell, what are the solutions?
Solution.
So what do we do, right? And I think that what Dr. Ball's intention was for this book is to start destroying these myths. So we there were a lot, we based, or we created solutions around a lot of myths, around a lot of falsehoods. Oh, we have a 1.2 trillion dollar buying power, and so then we're saying, oh, we just need to redirect those funds and stop buying Jordans, and that'll help us. So he said, well, let's destroy that, right? And then there's this idea that we can bank black, right? We can bank black, and that'll change our economic conditions. So I think what Dr. Ball is trying to get us, as Brother T said, to understand this terrain. And once we understand our terrain, then we can develop viable solutions. And so I really think that that's the intent of this particular book. Did anyone want to chime in?
Good point. I think you explained it in great detail.
Okay, good. Sister Crystal said I was wild at just how much is not understood about the system. Facts, Sister Crystal. And then a lot of us say we're educated. Oh, I have a PhD. I have a master's degree. I have a BS. I always tease my students. I say, you're getting your BS degree. And we just laugh. It's just like an inside joke. But we brag about those things. But what good is your education if you don't understand the world you're living in? I mean, think
Yes,
about that. We graduate, we got our high school diplomas, and happy. Oh, I got my diploma. Everybody's taking pictures. We putting our pictures on Facebook. All of us in our, diplomas, and we have our
Hmm.
diploma up and our cap and gowns. But then when you sit down and talk to these educated people, you don't understand the world you're living in. So
Right.
how educated are you? How educated are you if you can't solve your own problems? That's not an educated person. That's a fool.
Yes.
And so I agree with you, sister Crystal. And so next week we're going to meet at 7 p.m. to discuss the last chapter, chapter 7, conclusion, policy and organization. Policy and organization. He says policy and organization versus economics. So policy and organization versus economics. This is the last chapter of the book. So join us back here next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because we're going to be moving in. After we read this book, the brothers told me, Mother T said, Doc, this is the way to go. So make sure that you grab this book, family, The Color of Money, Black Banks, and the Racial Wealth Gap. This is the next text, the next read. All right, The Color of Money, Black Banks, and the Racial Wealth Gap. All right, and so make sure that you grab this book, because right after this, book, we're gonna jump into this book, and we'll probably give it like a week or two before we start a new book. But you can grab it and start reading it. Okay. All right, brothers. Do you all have any closing words?
uh,
On page 99, Dr. Ball ended with this. If black banks, black media, and elite white media, government officials, and ad buyers all heavily support and promote a myth, what chance do a targeted audience have? Okay, that's a good point. If black banks, black media, and elite white media, government officials, and ad buyers all heavily support and promote a myth, what chance do a targeted audience have?
You don't
And
have a chance.
so when the propaganda is that heavy and that thick, and you got puppets that we represent, that we support at times, to spew the same stuff like Killer Mike and the Jay-Z, what the audience is at bay, whatever comes their way, unless you understand they spewing a myth. This is propaganda. Keep away from that and let's continue to build our solutions. So that's the point I wanted to end.
Thank you so much, Brother
Awesome.
C. Peace, y'all. Peace, 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 and black power. Have a blacktastic week.